Hello and welcome to Raider HQ After Dark. I'm your host Raider. And this video I kind of wanted to talk to you about the laws, rules, and regulations just in general. I wanted to share a little behind the scenes about how I look at them and how I view them, from a staff member perspective. Okay. And the reason why I wanted to do this is because, and it's not just because of comments in this channel, but mostly like content creators and some of them at least, they get really hyper focused about case law. And I just kind of wanted to go over that from my perspective and just kind of explain so that way, if individuals are like, why is he talking about this other thing other than the case law? I'll kind of just explain it. So, this is my perspective, okay, on how the process works and how I should be focusing on things. So, the first thing I'll say is in instances where you have case law, right? This is where a veteran sues the VA, right? And because of the outcome of the lawsuit, a change is made in the VA policy or process, or, depends on what the lawsuit's about, right? So it could be wide, it could be a sweeping change, it could be a very niche change. But all in all, anytime that we have kind of a case law, a Petetti versus McDonald type situation for painful motion, you're going to see, that the VA changes its current practice and adopts something new. Now, the thing I would like to say is the judge that presided over the case does not set policy. Okay? What they can do is they can make a ruling, and that ruling can, tell the VA it needs to change its policy in this new direction. But it doesn't, it says what to do, but it doesn't say how to do it. Okay? So what happens is that they will, set out a judgment, right? And then the VA and all of their legal team will review the judgment and determine what they need to do in order to satisfy the judgment. So then you'll see it manifest in like a 38 CFR to where they will either update an existing 38 CFR or they will create a new CFR that addresses, the change in the law, right? The case law type situation. Well, these can have like a macro capacity. Okay, they've kind of said, you need to do, once again, this is what you need to do, VA employee. But they didn't tell us how to do it. Okay, so the how to do the thing that satisfies the CFR, that satisfies the case law, is exclusively found in the manual. Okay, and I'm going to give you an example of this. Okay, in that, and somebody did quote this, like the Petiti versus McDonald. Okay, like painful motion, right? If you have painful motion in a joint, you have a minimum of 10%. And somebody told me, if I say that I have painful motion, there ain't no way that you can't give me the 10%. Okay, challenge accepted. So what happens is that the manual actually flavors what the CFR says. So this is the case law. This is the 38 CFR that was adjusted for it. And this is the manual reference that tells, one of them at least, that tells us how to interpret all of this stuff. So it's like, okay, and it talks about painful motion and it talks about like lay testimony, this is great. Like lay testimony may suffice, lay evidence of painful motion is sufficient to satisfy granting painful motion, right? And that's what they kind of say when they say that, like, hey, look, the case law says you've got to do that. Okay? And the reason why I, Raider, why I on my channel am hyper focused about the manual is because that's the fine detail, right? That is the fine detail that can cost you your claim if you're not paying attention to the manual. And the reason why is, right? These are all the examples of why I have to accept it, right? Like I have to accept the minimum compensable rating when lay painful motion statements are sufficient, right? Well, then you come down here and you're like, okay. And then we get to the interpretation. A finding of painful motion under 38 CFR 4.59 based upon lay or subjective reporting of pain is contingent on a credibility assessment as discussed in the manual reference of 521A2B. And there you have it. The thing that has to happen, the manual can make it to where it's not true at times. Okay? Because I'll bet you $1 that legal case doesn't talk about a credibility assessment, nor does the 38 CFR. But the manual does. So this is the kind of situation where sometimes people get really, 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 really upset at the rater. You didn't apply the law correctly. No, I did, because I applied what the manual said. And the manual tells the staff members how to interpret the law. So if you're ever going to review something, review the manual, because it changes daily, literally daily. And these aren't even liberalizing laws. This is just the VA updating its policies on CFRs, on how it interprets things. I mean, you have situations where this is why I'm really, really focused on it, is because it updates, like some of these are benign, where it just updates small things. But I covered a couple of these updates and delete the guidance on when service connection for causal condition is within the scope of a claim for secondary conditions. Like, that's a big deal, right? Like, some of these can be a big deal and they're snuck in here. So this is why I always daily review the manual. You can tell me that a case law comes down, that's cool. But I'm only going to get called an error on the manual. So what am I focused on? The thing that will or will not give me an error. So if the manual tells me to jump, I'm going how high? So if you want to better understand the rater and the rater's process, and you want to fight them, now why this is important is for higher level reviews. If you just come at me with the macro, well, the case law says, and you're not fighting effectively, you brought a spoon to a knife fight, okay? Like, you are not utilizing the evidence appropriately to win your higher level review or your supplemental claim, right? Because the manual can have drastically weird interpretations of what the case law is by the VA itself, because the VA does the manual, right? They can say that they're technically satisfying a component of a case law by, or a part of the CFR, and I'll be darned if I can't figure out how that satisfies it, but technically they are. And, sometimes they're not. And that's where new case laws come into effect, where a veteran sues and says, wait a minute, this doesn't actually say what it says. So I just put this out here as a public service announcement, okay, to kind of help everybody understand that whenever I'm moving forward, like whenever I'm explaining something, I am in this order and I'm down here. Like, this to me is the most important thing that I am looking at. Case law is important to send me in a right direction. CFR is important because, sometimes it does have the majority of the information that I need. It's a quick read. And then sometimes I got to, dig through 18 different manual references that are scattered throughout the manual that have components of what I need to know. And this is kind of why being a rater is hard, and why it takes 2 years for them to become, familiar enough with these laws and regulations, so that way they don't get errored into the ground. They don't get a QMS error or a quality error every 2 seconds for doing the wrong thing. Now, it might not functionally be the wrong thing, but it might actually, legally be the wrong thing. So anyway, sorry about that. I had to let my dog outside. She was barking. Um, So that's about all I have for this, but I hope that you can hopefully understand like why I prioritize what I prioritize and what you should prioritize as, if you're trying to fight, a prior denial or an erroneous award or, something to where maybe the laws, rules or regulations were not applied effectively. Cuz if you try using this, yeah, good luck. But anyway, that's about all I got for you this time. Raider out.